"You can't stay here anymore, Mom." That's what my son said, as if I were a stranger. I packed my bags without a word, no begging, no tears. But I left something behind in his filing cabinet, a signed document with one sentence he never saw coming. His mother co-owns the house he just tried to evict her from. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments and don't forget to subscribe. Brian didn't even look up from his phone when he said it. "You can't stay here anymore, Mom." The sentence hung in the air like a snapped power line, quiet, dangerous, humming with everything unsaid. Helen Carter stood in the kitchen doorway, one hand still resting lightly on the back of a dining chair. Her son sat at the breakfast counter, scrolling, as if he were deciding on dinner, not uprooting his 72-year-old mother. Across the granite island, Lydia wiped a non-existent crumb from the sink. She didn't say a word, just straightened her posture and turned her back in a slow, deliberate pivot. Helen's fingers curled slightly against the chair. Not tight, not trembling, just steady. "How long do I have?" she asked, her voice calm. Too calm. Brian finally looked up. His jaw moved, chewing over something that wasn't food. "A couple days. End of the week at the latest. Lydia's sister's visiting. It's gonna be cramped." Cramped. The word made Helen's chest tighten. She'd been sleeping in the guest room. She didn't use their kitchen. She washed her dishes by hand. Cramped? Lydia cleared her throat. Still facing the window, she said softly, "It's just been a lot lately. For everyone." Helen nodded once, slowly. "Of course." The words barely made it past her lips. "I'll start packing." She turned without waiting for a reply. The stairs creaked under her feet. They always had, since the day she'd moved in 6 months ago, after Walter died, after the funeral, after Brian said, "We'll make it work, Mom. You won't be alone." The guest room hadn't changed since then. A single bed, a bookshelf with nothing on it but a candle and an old Reader's Digest. The curtains still didn't quite meet in the middle. She opened the closet. Her suitcase was already there. Some part of her had known. She pulled it out quietly and laid it open on the bed. Her hands moved without thought, rolling sweaters, folding slacks, tucking undergarments into the mesh zipper pouch. Every sound felt amplified, the soft zip of fabric, the dull thud of a shoe dropped gently into the corner, the faint clink of her rosary beads. The phone buzzed on the dresser. Anna Doyle. "Do you need me?" Helen stared at the message. She imagined Anna's voice, brisk, cutting, already halfway out the door. Her thumbs hovered over the screen. "Helen, not yet." She set the phone down with care. There was dignity left in this moment, and she'd be damned if she gave it up to pity. Downstairs, she could hear Brian's voice, low, laughing now, maybe talking to Lydia, or maybe the TV. It didn't matter. The sound felt foreign. Helen packed her scarf last, the red one Walter had given her for their 40th anniversary. She paused, fingers grazing the soft wool. She left it out, draped it carefully around her neck. A little armor. She zipped the suitcase closed. At the closet's far edge, her eyes landed on something she hadn't touched in months, the dark wooden trunk, locked, heavy, tucked behind an old winter coat. She didn't move toward it, not yet. Instead, she sat on the edge of the bed, upright, palms on her knees. She could feel the house breathing beneath her feet, the faint hum of central air, the murmur of a home that never truly opened to her. Another buzz on her phone. "Anna, just say when." Helen smiled faintly, then the sound came. Footsteps, slow, approaching, stopping outside her door. A single knock. "Helen?" Lydia's voice muffled. "Do you want some tea?" Helen stood, composed. "No, thank you," she said through the door. "I'm all set." She listened to the retreating footsteps, the silence that followed. Then she walked to the closet, kneeled down, pulled the trunk forward, and whispered to herself, almost without breath, "They didn't even ask what I was leaving behind." Morning broke soft and gray through the blinds. Helen opened her eyes to silence, the kind that felt temporary, like it might be broken at any moment by footsteps or a knock, or the low murmur of voices that didn't include her. She dressed deliberately, slacks, a cardigan, sensible shoes. The red scarf stayed wrapped around her neck. The suitcase waited by the door, zipped and upright. She turned to the trunk. Her hand rested on its lid for a long breath. Then she pulled the key from her jewelry box, fitted into the brass lock, and turned. The quiet click echoed louder than expected. Inside, the papers sat exactly as she had arranged them years ago. Wills, medical directives, insurance policies, not in a folder, not labeled, just loose, aged edges nestled among a folded quilt and a photo album no one had asked to see. Helen shifted the top layer gently. Beneath it, a crisp envelope with Mark Feldman's letterhead. She considered taking it, then thought better. She re-locked the trunk and pushed it deep behind the winter coat. Its shape disappeared into the shadows. They wouldn't look here. They didn't even know what they were looking for. Helen stood, wiped her hands on her pants, and scanned the room one final time. She left the bed made, the closet door open, and the little candle on the bookshelf centered exactly where it had been when she arrived. She wheeled the suitcase toward the hallway. The sound of the wheels on carpet was oddly sharp. At the top of the stairs, she paused. Laughter floated up from the living room. Brian's voice again, light and easy, probably on a call. Lydia responded with a hum, the kind that said she wasn't really listening. Helen adjusted her grip and guided the suitcase down one careful step at a time. No one came to help. Halfway down, she heard Brian say, "Hang on a sec," followed by the distinct shuffle of feet. He appeared at the bottom landing, still holding his phone, eyes flicking to the suitcase, then to her face. "That everything?" he asked casually. Helen smiled politely. "The essentials." He nodded once and turned away, already speaking again into the phone. "Yeah, sorry, just my mom heading out." Helen bit the inside of her cheek and kept walking. Lydia stood in the kitchen doorway, arms crossed loosely. She looked at Helen but said nothing. Helen reached the front door and placed her hand on the knob. She turned back for the briefest moment. Lydia looked away. Sunlight met her face as she stepped outside. It was cooler than expected, that early spring chill that still lingered even in April. She let it wrap around her, bracing, honest. She walked down the porch steps, the suitcase bumping behind her on each riser. Her car sat alone in the driveway, a faint dusting of pollen across the windshield. She opened the trunk, lifted the suitcase in, and closed it gently. Then she reached into her coat pocket, pulled out her phone, and pressed Anna's name. The line picked up after half a ring. "I'm on my way," Anna said before Helen could speak. Her voice was alert. "Ready." Helen exhaled. "Thank you." "Did he say it to your face?" Anna asked. "Yes." There was a pause, the kind friends don't need to fill. Helen looked back at the house. Brian's silhouette passed behind the curtain, just a shadow. "I left them a gift," Helen said. Anna hesitated. "What kind of gift?" Helen opened the driver's side door. The kind they won't recognize until it's too late. She slipped into the seat, shut the door, and turned the key. As the engine turned over, the front door opened behind her. Brian stepped out, barefoot, holding a coffee mug. "You need gas money or something?" he called out. Helen didn't answer. She just gave a small wave, eyes straight ahead, and drove. From the rearview mirror, the house shrank, but upstairs, behind a closet door they'd never opened, the trunk waited, quiet, locked, and patient. Helen found the place easily. Tucked between a shuttered florist and an old hardware store, Melba's Diner still had its original neon sign, flickering a little at the edges like it was breathing in its sleep. The kind of place you only knew if someone told you about it. Anna had years ago, back when Helen still wore her nurse's badge and Walter still drove her home from night shifts. She slid into a booth near the back, sunlight streaking through the slatted blinds in sharp golden lines. A waitress with bright blue nails and a tired smile brought her tea before she could ask, "You want to wait for your friend to order?" Helen nodded. "She'll be here." 2 minutes later, the door jingled. Anna Doyle walked in like she owned the place, hair cropped short, leather jacket, no-nonsense energy in every step. Her eyes landed on Helen instantly. She didn't smile, not yet. Helen didn't move, just raised her teacup slightly in greeting. Anna slid into the booth across from her and peeled off her gloves. "You look too calm. That worries me." Helen exhaled through her nose. "Would you rather I cry into the pie?" Anna leaned back, waving at the waitress. "Depends. Is it apple or cherry?" "Cherry?" Anna grunted. "Then cry later." The waitress brought a second tea and 2 slices of pie without asking. Helen sliced her fork cleanly through the cherry filling. He didn't even flinch. "Men like Brian don't," Anna said, no hesitation. "He said I had a couple days." Lydia didn't say anything at all, just wiped down the counter like she was already disinfecting the memory of me. Anna's fork clinked against the plate. "They're cowards, comfortable cowards, hiding behind politeness while pushing you out the door like a damn delivery package." Helen smiled faintly. "He asked if I needed gas money." Anna let out a bark of laughter, sharp and humorless. "That little—" "Don't. You'll get arrested." "I'll get away with it," Anna muttered, taking a bite. "I know how to bury a body in snow, learned it from a Discovery Channel special." Helen reached into her coat pocket and gently placed something on the table. Anna's eyes dropped to it, a brass house key, familiar, slightly dulled from use. "You didn't," Anna said, but the smirk started before she finished the sentence. Helen raised an eyebrow. "They didn't ask for it back." Anna picked up the key, studied it for a moment, then handed it back. "Keep it. If nothing else, it'll annoy him to know you still could walk in any time." "I wouldn't." "That's not the point," Anna said. "It's about knowing you could." Helen tucked the key away. Her tea had gone lukewarm, but she sipped it anyway. She felt strangely lighter here, surrounded by the clink of forks, the low hum of a radio playing soft classic rock, the scent of something fried and unapologetic wafting from the kitchen. Anna wiped her mouth with a napkin and leaned in. "So, what now?" Helen glanced at her phone. "I have a call to make." Anna raised her brows. "You calling him back?" Helen shook her head. "Mark Feldman." Anna let out a low whistle. "The lawyer. He helped Walter and me with everything years ago, and I never removed Brian from the documents." "Yet," Anna said pointedly. Helen pressed the screen, found Mark's name, and hit call. The line rang. She held the phone to her ear, calm, eyes steady across the table. After 2 rings, a warm voice picked up. "Feldman Law." "Hi," she said. "This is Helen Carter. I need to schedule something sensitive." Anna watched her with a quiet smile. "Yes," Helen continued. "It's urgent, and it's about my estate." The bell above the law office door gave a soft metallic chime as Helen stepped in. It smelled the way it always had, paper, old wood, and something faintly citrus. Mark Feldman liked lemon-scented furniture polish. He also liked things where they belonged. The waiting room was neat, not sterile. 2 framed certificates, a ficus plant, a bowl of butterscotch candies no one ever seemed to touch. "Helen," Mark said, appearing from the hall like he'd been listening for her steps, "you look good." Then, catching the flicker of strain behind her polite smile, he softened his voice. "Come in." She followed him down the carpeted hallway, her shoes barely making a sound. Anna was already there, settled in the corner of Mark's office like she belonged to the room. She didn't stand when Helen entered, just gave a small nod that said, "I've got you." Mark motioned to the leather chair across from his desk. "Let's talk." Helen sat, her hands folded in her lap like they had in every hospital meeting she'd ever endured. Alert, patient, in control, even when her world shifted. "Brian told me to leave," she said. No preamble. Mark blinked once. "I'm sorry." Lydia didn't say much, she added, her voice clipped. She didn't need to. Anna crossed her arms. "They want the house, space, freedom, all the perks, none of the actual care." Helen nodded once. "He said it would be too cramped, Lydia's sister's coming to visit." Mark leaned forward, elbows resting on the desk, hands clasped. "What do you want to do, Helen?" She looked at him clear-eyed. "Change everything." He didn't ask what she meant. He knew. "Do you have the current documents?" "They're safe," she said carefully. "In a place neither of them will look, but I remember everything. The original version leaves everything to Brian. primary beneficiary, executor, power of attorney. Mark winced. All right, we'll wipe that slate clean. The good news is, it's your right, and you're in a clear, healthy state of mind. That makes this process solid, legally and ethically. Helen gave a dry smile. Not that Brian would care about the second part. Anna leaned forward now. What are her options? Mark pulled a yellow legal pad from his drawer and uncapped a pen. We create a new will, clear language, no ambiguity. You assign someone else executor, name alternate beneficiaries. If you want to leave property, accounts, assets, anything to someone else or a program, we detail that. Helen nodded again, firmer this time. I want Brian out of everything, she said. Anna whistled softly. Just like that? No, Helen said. Not just like that. Like this. She took a breath and began to list from memory dates, account names, the home deed, the joint annuity Walter had left her. She spoke with the precision of someone who had filed prescriptions for decades, who had sat with dying men and remembered every allergy, every dose, every warning label. Mark's pen didn't stop moving. When she finished, he sat back and glanced at Anna. Would you be willing to serve as witness when we sign? Gladly, Anna said. I'll even bring cookies. Helen smirked. Bring something stronger. Mark stood. I'll draft the first version today. We'll meet again to review before anything is notarized and filed. Helen rose with him. You've always been honest with me, Mark. That's why I came here. He nodded, expression quiet. I never liked your son. Helen blinked, surprised. Smart people don't always raise kind ones, Mark added. You're not the first client with regrets about who inherits. As they stepped back into the waiting room, Anna put a hand lightly on Helen's back. A gesture not of comfort, but solidarity. Mark held the door open for them both. One more thing, he said as Helen passed. She turned. If those old documents you remembered, if they ever came to light, say, in a dispute? Helen tilted her head. Yes? Mark smiled slowly. They'd make excellent decoys. Helen didn't smile back. She just looked him in the eye. I left them somewhere safe, she said, just in case someone goes snooping. The next morning, Helen didn't check her messages until after she'd parked in front of Mark Feldman's office again. Sunlight bounced off the windshield, and for a moment she sat still, phone glowing quietly in her hand. One new message, Lydia Carter. Hey, Helen, just wanted to say we hope you found a place. Let us know if you need help with storage or anything. Take care. Helen read it twice. No apology, no warmth, just hollow civility wrapped in guilt-proof language. She tapped delete without replying. Inside, Mark's assistant offered coffee and let her straight in. The office smelled faintly of cinnamon this time. Anna must have arrived first. Thought you might need caffeine if we're signing your second life into existence, Anna said, holding out a paper cup. Helen took it with a nod. I brought cookies. Anna's face lit up. You're already more generous than your son. Mark closed the door behind them and motioned toward the desk. A manila folder waited, crisp and centered. Everything's drafted, he said. We'll walk through it line by line, but the gist, Brian is removed from all legal authority and inheritance. You've redirected the estate. Helen opened the folder slowly. The pages smelled faintly of toner, fresh and permanent. Anna, Mark continued, you're listed as executor and primary beneficiary of Helen's savings and home. The secondary beneficiary is the local senior program you requested, specifically their emergency housing fund. It's clean, straightforward. No room for challenge unless someone's got a time machine. Helen traced the edge of the paper with one finger. And if they find the old documents? She asked softly. Mark gave a small shake of his head. They're obsolete. You've made your wishes clear today. Legally, that's all that matters. Helen nodded and uncapped the pen Mark slid toward her. The signature felt good, like closing a door. A quiet, final latch. Anna leaned back, arms crossed, expression unreadable as she watched Helen sign each page. She didn't say anything until Helen set the pen down and exhaled. That felt cold, Helen said, colder than I expected. It wasn't cold, Anna replied. It was clean. Mark took the papers and affixed his official stamp with a heavy, deliberate thud. Preliminary copy is complete. Final will be printed, signed, notarized next week. Helen looked down at the fresh ink. Her name in blue. No trace of Brian anywhere. I should feel guilty, she said. Anna raised her mug. Why? Because I raised him. Anna clinked her coffee cup against Helen's. Number U survived raising him. There's a difference. They sat for a moment in quiet, the kind of silence that holds space, not weight. Mark flipped the folder closed and leaned back. You've done the hard part. Helen stared out the office window. A kid passed by on a scooter, face lit up with a kind of joy that felt like another planet. Then Mark added, casually but clearly, "That trunk you left behind? It'll make this airtight." Helen turned to him slowly. "How do you mean?" Mark's smile was faint. "Old drafts, that name, Brian? Dated paperwork? It creates a paper trail, one that leads away from your true intentions. If he tries to contest, he'll be clinging to ghosts." Helen blinked. "You think he'll go looking?" "Oh," Mark said dryly, "he absolutely will." Anna grinned. "Let him find exactly what you wanted him to find." Helen sat back in her chair. The relief she'd expected to feel wasn't soft, it was sharp, energizing, like she'd come up for air after years underwater. And somewhere in the quiet of her mind, a thought bloomed. He's going to think he's won. "I didn't just leave junk in that trunk," Helen said as they stood outside Mark's office beside Anna's car. "There are at least 5 versions of my will in there. One from when Walter and I were still renting, one after we bought the house, one right before Brian's wedding." Mark raised an eyebrow. "All naming him?" Helen nodded. "Every one." His lips curled into a grin, not cruel but sharp. "You couldn't have left a better bait pile." Anna leaned against the hood, arms crossed, amused. "He's going to open it like it's buried treasure." "He'll think he struck gold," Helen added, eyes narrowing slightly. "He won't realize he's handling ash." Mark's phone buzzed and he excused himself inside. Anna opened the car door for Helen like a chauffeur. "Where to?" she asked. Helen slid in. "Somewhere no one's looking." They ended up at the Midland Inn, a 2-story motel on the edge of town, wedged between a bowling alley and a Dollar General. It had no frills, no spa, and no digital keypads. Just a woman at the desk named Carol, who called everyone Han and handed over a real key attached to a piece of blue plastic. Room 212 faced the parking lot. Carpeted floors, a twin bed, a floral bedspread from the 90s, and a heater that clicked every 15 minutes. Helen looked around and said, "Perfect." Anna, trailing behind with a tote bag full of cookies and instant coffee packets, rolled her eyes. "You've got strange taste in hideouts." "It's not a hideout," Helen said. "It's a transition." Anna opened the blinds a little to let the daylight in. "Still depressing." "It will be less so in 10 minutes," Helen replied, pulling a pillowcase from her suitcase. It wasn't just any pillowcase. It smelled faintly of lavender and starch. Walter used to say it reminded him of Sunday mornings. She smoothed it across the motel pillow and unzipped the second suitcase Anna had brought, this one filled with 2 flannel blankets, a jar candle, and a small photo of Helen's wedding day. Anna placed it carefully on the nightstand. They stood in silence for a minute, looking at it. The younger Helen in the photo smiled like she didn't yet know how heavy people could become. Anna finally broke the moment. "You're going to sleep like a bear in winter." Helen turned, slipped off her shoes, and sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "I might," she said, for the first time in a while. Anna's phone buzzed, then Helen's. They both checked their screens. Brian Carter, missed call 2 times. Voicemail, 1 new. Anna looked at her sideways. "You're not answering that, right?" Helen tossed the phone onto the other pillow. "Number, I'm giving him exactly what he wanted. Distance." Anna grinned. "Funny how quiet looks a lot like control when you hold it right." Helen lay back slowly, pulling the flannel over her chest, and stared at the speckled ceiling. The motel heater clicked, then rumbled softly to life. The bed dipped gently under her weight, like it was built to receive exhaustion. "I'll check in on you tomorrow," Anna said, dimming the single lamp beside the bed. "I know," Helen whispered. Anna paused at the door. "You sure you don't want me to unplug that phone, just in case he tries again?" Helen smiled faintly, eyes already closing. Let him try. The door clicked shut. The room settled into a hushed, warm quiet. Outside, the world kept moving, cars passing, wind brushing cheap vinyl siding. But inside, Helen Carter, 72 and newly unburdened, exhaled deeply and let her mind go still. Her phone lit up again across the room. Another call. She didn't stir. The voicemail pinged into existence, unheard, unopened. Brian's voice filled the empty line, quiet and shaky. Mom, hey, where are you staying? Can you call me? Then silence. No apology, no admission, just the sound of a man slowly realizing something was slipping out of his grip. The motel room was still dim when Helen awoke, though the light outside had shifted, no longer night, not quite morning. A thin bar of sun slipped through the blinds, landing squarely on her phone. The screen glowed with a missed call badge. Voicemail, one new. She didn't need to listen to it, not really. Helen sat up slowly, wrapping the flannel blanket around her shoulders. The motel heater had shut off sometime in the night. Her bones noticed before her mind did. She reached for the phone with a sort of reluctant calm. Play voicemail? She tapped delete instead. A little digital sigh, and it vanished. Her thumb hovered for a beat. Then she swiped to messages, scrolled to Brian's thread, and deleted that too. Gone. Every fragment of guilt or panic he might have lobbed her way. A quiet, one-sided unraveling of connection. She slipped into her shoes and walked to the small table under the window. A styrofoam cup of motel coffee waited from the night before. Cold now, but present. She sipped it anyway, then picked up the manila folder Anna had brought yesterday and tucked it into her bag. At 9:13 a.m., Anna called. "Well?" she asked without saying hello. He left another voicemail. Anna's laugh cracked through the speaker like a dry branch. Let him stew, let him cook, hell, let him roast. Helen smiled softly. Already deleted. I'm proud of you, Anna said. Then, what's the plan for today, Madam Executor? Helen looked around the small room. The air felt different this morning, less borrowed, more hers. I want to find a place. Not another motel, I hope. A real one, with windows that open and carpet that doesn't try to bite back. Anna chuckled. You need help? No, Helen said, but I'll text you the address once I find something. By late morning, Helen had parked herself in the local public library, nestled between the large print fiction shelves and a surprisingly warm radiator. Her tote bag rested beside her on the table, and the glow of a loaner laptop lit up her face. There was a quiet hum around her, kids clicking keyboards, someone thumbing through newspapers, the occasional squeak of rubber soles. For the first time in days, she didn't feel like she was hiding. She felt like she was choosing. She typed in Senior Housing Indianapolis Affordable and hit search. Dozens of results bloomed on the screen, but only one held her eyes. Bright Haven Community, independent living for seniors, 65 plus, stuck pet-friendly, garden spaces, income-based options available. She clicked the link, a warm beige color scheme. A photo of a woman with silver hair and sneakers planting tomatoes in a raised garden bed, and below it, a button. Schedule a tour. Helen stared at the screen. Something fluttered in her chest, not panic. Something quieter, maybe hope. She picked up her phone and dialed the number on the page. A polite voice answered, professional but kind. Bright Haven? This is Janelle speaking. Helen hesitated, then cleared her throat. Hi, Janelle. My name's Helen Carter. I saw your community listed online, and I was wondering if I could schedule a visit. Of course, Helen, Janelle replied. We'd love to show you around. When works for you? Helen glanced toward the big library clock. Tomorrow morning? 10:30? Okay? Perfect. Janelle took her information, gave her directions, and ended the call with a cheerful, looking forward to meeting you. Helen ended the call slowly, phone still pressed to her ear for a second longer than necessary. She didn't notice she was smiling until she saw her reflection in the black screen. She closed the laptop, slid it back into its bin, and walked out into the chilly afternoon. The wind tugged at her scarf, but she tightened it. She didn't look back at the library. Tomorrow had a shape now, and somewhere on the other side of town, Brian was probably pacing, still waiting for an answer he was never going to get. Brian stared at the closet. It looked exactly as it had when Helen left, a winter coat still on its wire hanger, a pair of old rain boots shoved into the corner, and a trunk that didn't belong to either of them. "I thought she took everything," Lydia said, arms crossed in the hallway. Brian didn't answer. He bent down and pulled the trunk forward, grunting as the weight shifted over the hardwood floor. "Is it locked?" Lydia asked, taking a cautious step back like the thing might explode. Brian tried the latch. It clicked open. Nope. Inside, layers of papers, some yellowed at the edges, sat beneath a folded quilt. There was no note, no folder, no explanation, just a quiet stack of secrets no one had invited him to read. He pulled a few out and scanned them. Last, Will and Testament of Helen Carter. Lydia moved closer. "Is that—" "This one's dated 2011, Brian muttered. He grabbed another. "This says 2015. Here's one from 2018. Lydia exhaled in visible relief. "Okay, so she didn't change it after all. She just left." Brian sifted through the stack again, as if expecting a trap to spring from between the pages. "These all name me. Executor. Full inheritance. It's all here." "She must have known we'd find it." "She wanted us to." Brian smiled slowly. Lydia leaned down and kissed him on the cheek. "Then we're good." He nodded, though his eyes didn't leave the documents. Across town, sunlight spilled across Helen's face as she stepped from her car in front of Bright Haven. The building had a welcoming sprawl, nothing cold or institutional, just a pale brick structure wrapped in cheerful trim and rows of blooming planter beds. Wind chimes danced softly near the entryway, their melody light and irregular, like laughter caught in a breeze. Janelle met her at the front desk exactly at 10:30. "Ms. Carter?" she asked with a warm, genuine smile. Helen nodded. "Please, Helen." "Welcome to Bright Haven. Let me show you around." They walked slowly through wide hallways painted in warm neutrals, with sunlight spilling through skylights and glass doors. There was a small library, a fitness room with yoga mats, a sunroom lined with rocking chairs, and a garden courtyard where someone's tabby cat sprawled across a bench like he'd paid rent. Janelle moved with quiet pride, explaining each amenity without sales pitch or pressure. She wasn't young, but she had a steadiness about her, someone who knew how to listen, and more importantly, when not to speak. "This is one of our open units," she said, unlocking a door on the second floor. The apartment was small but bright. A kitchenette, a soft beige couch, white curtains dancing just slightly from the fan's breeze. The smell of lemon oil and fresh paint hung in the air. "It's beautiful," Helen whispered. Janelle stepped back and let her explore. Helen ran her hand along the kitchen counter, opened a cabinet, pulled the curtain slightly aside. From the window, you could see the garden beds out back. "Do you have anyone in mind for the unit?" Helen asked. "We do," Janelle said, smiling. "You." Helen blinked. "We held it for you. After your call, something in your voice told me you needed more than just a floor plan." Helen turned away so Janelle wouldn't see her eyes fill. She ran her hand along the windowsill and cleared her throat. "Do I need to sign something?" Janelle chuckled. "Just say the word and it's yours." Before Helen could answer, her phone buzzed in her coat pocket. A message from Anna. Just saw him at Home Depot. He was practically glowing. Said something about finding the good documents. Didn't say much else. "Should I be worried or should we pop champagne?" Helen stared at the screen, lips twitching. She looked at Janelle and said, "Is there somewhere quiet where I can sit and sign paperwork?" "Of course," Janelle said. "Right this way." Helen followed her into the hallway, phone still in hand. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She typed back, "Let him glow. Fireworks look brightest right before they burn out." Mark's office smelled like fresh ink and purpose. Helen sat across from him once again, this time without the cautious edge in her shoulders. The manila folder lay open between them, a clean stack of final documents sitting in perfect alignment. Anna stood behind her, quiet, arms folded, her presence a steady drumbeat of support. "You sure about the distributions?" Mark asked, tapping his pen once on the top sheet. Helen didn't hesitate. Yes. He nodded and read aloud as she signed Primary Beneficiary, Anna Doyle. Secondary, Bright Haven Senior Housing Initiative. Tertiary, St. Jude's Food Bank of Marion County. No Brian, not in the margins, not in a footnote, not in a contingency clause. As Helen reached the final page, her hand didn't shake. The pen glided smoothly, her signature looping with a clarity that didn't flinch. Anna leaned forward slightly, eyes glinting. You just rewrote your entire legacy. Helen smiled. I just took it back. Mark pressed the court seal onto the last page, the metal notary embosser leaving a raised, perfect imprint. Filed and witnessed, he said. Within 3 business days, the county clerk's office will record it officially, but the legal shift happens now. He slid the folder toward Helen. You've just made your estate challenge-proof. Helen exhaled slowly. That trunk? They really think they've got me covered. They've got a handful of paper ghosts, Mark replied. And you've got the law. She reached into her purse and pulled out a folded thank you card. She handed it to Mark without ceremony. Inside was a small donation check for a pro bono trust fund he maintained. You didn't need to, he said, eyes softening. I did, Helen replied, because I'll never be someone who takes care for granted. Anna gave her shoulder a light squeeze. Still the classiest woman I know, even while disinheriting her son. Especially while disinheriting him, Helen murmured. It was late afternoon by the time Helen returned to the motel. The air was dry and breezy. Her steps felt lighter, like the past 6 months had been unspooled behind her, and she was walking free of its tangles. She was unlocking her door when she heard it, tires crunching over gravel. Fast. She turned her head, and there he was. Brian's SUV slid into the parking spot across from hers, the door flinging open before the engine even stopped. He emerged, waving something in his hand. Helen! She didn't move, didn't speak. He stormed across the lot, holding a folded stack of aged paper, creased, thumbed through, smudged at the edges. Familiar. I found this, he shouted, shaking the documents like they were evidence. You left this in the closet. Helen watched him, unblinking, her key still in the lock, her hand unmoving. Brian thrust the papers toward her. These name me. Executor, full inheritance. You can't just pretend that never existed. His voice cracked. From panic or anger, she couldn't tell. I've already spoken to a lawyer, he added, his breath short. I'm not letting you do this. Helen tilted her head slightly. Do what? You know what I'm talking about, he barked. Anna's voice echoed in her head. Let him stew. Let him roast. Helen calmly removed her key from the lock and stepped toward him, just enough to close the gap between fear and control. She looked at the paper, wills she'd written years ago, outdated and irrelevant. She could smell the attic-like must of them from where she stood. Her eyes lifted to his face. Brian, she said gently. And then she smiled. Not cruel, not triumphant, just certain. Before he could speak again, she opened her motel room door and stepped inside. She closed it behind her without another word. From the window, she watched him stand there, the pages trembling in his grip, waiting for a fight that wouldn't come. The legal fight had already ended. He just hadn't realized yet. He was swinging at a ghost. The motel room door hadn't even clicked shut before Brian started banging on it. Helen? Open the damn door! From behind the thin wood, Helen stared at the handle. She didn't move. She waited. Outside, gravel crunched. Someone walking up. Then a voice, low and unmistakably female. Brian? Lydia. Helen waited a beat, then slowly turned the knob. She stepped out as if she'd been waiting for a breeze, not a confrontation. Her red scarf fluttered in the afternoon wind. Brian spun around, still holding the bundle of aged wills like a legal grenade. You lied to me, he spat. No, Helen replied. You just don't know how to read dates. He shoved a page forward. This says I inherit the house, the savings, the IRA. It names me executor. Helen glanced at the paper. That one's from 2015. It's still your signature. And it's still outdated, she said calmly. Superseded, rescinded, and filed into legal oblivion. but thank you for proving you found it." Lydia stepped forward, eyes sharp, voice coiled. "She's bluffing. Those are real. She just never filed anything else. She can't." Helen tilted her head slightly. "Can't? Or didn't tell you she did?" Lydia hesitated. Brian's voice cracked again. "You're doing this to punish me." "I'm doing this," Helen said, "because I'm finally free to." A voice broke in from across the parking lot. "Everything okay over there?" Helen turned. Rachel. A young woman in a green hoodie and pajama pants stood outside room 208, phone up and recording. "Just curious," Rachel added, "because if someone's waving papers and yelling at a senior citizen in a motel parking lot, I think I'm legally required to live stream it." Brian's hand dropped slightly, his face flushed red. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" he hissed at Helen. She stepped closer, softly but firmly. "You enjoyed making me feel like a burden, like furniture to be moved around. You made me think dignity had to be negotiated." Her voice didn't rise, but something in it hardened. "You made a mistake, Brian. You thought I wouldn't act. You thought paperwork and silence meant power." Brian looked ready to explode. Lydia pulled his arm. "We should go, now." But Brian yanked it away. "She's bluffing, Lydia." Helen's smile was almost kind. "Ask the court," she said. "They'll tell you who owns what." Brian stared at her, face contorting between disbelief and fear and something dangerously close to grief. "You're my mother," he said. "I was," Helen replied, "and I still am. But I am also a woman with a will." And then, softly, she added, "And the will no longer includes you." Brian stepped back like he'd been struck. Lydia reached for his elbow again. This time he let her guide him. They turned toward the car in silence. Rachel lowered her phone and gave Helen a quiet thumbs up. "Legend," she muttered before heading back inside. Helen stood still for a moment, breathing in the sharp, clean wind. No one shouted, no one begged, no one threatened to sue. Only gravel under tires and the distant hum of someone's TV from another room. She turned, walked back into her motel room, and locked the door behind her. She didn't cry, she didn't gloat. Instead, she poured herself a glass of water, sipped, and sat on the edge of the bed. Her hands were steady. The old draft lay folded neatly on the table, left there by Brian in all his righteous fury. She picked it up and stared at the signature that used to mean something. Then she lit the motel's complimentary matchbook and watched the first page curl black. Outside, in the passenger seat of Brian's car, Lydia finally spoke. "What are we going to do?" Brian didn't answer. His jaw twitched. His foot pressed harder on the gas. He didn't look at her. He just muttered, almost too quietly to hear, "She thinks this is over." Helen unlocked the door with a soft, deliberate turn of the key. Her key, not borrowed, not tolerated, not made as an afterthought. It glinted faintly in her hand as she pushed open the door to apartment 2C. The sunlight poured in before she even stepped across the threshold. "This is yours now," Janelle said behind her, holding a clipboard and a gentle smile. "No rush to unpack. Take it slow. We want it to feel like home, not like another stop." Helen turned back, her throat tightening, not from grief, but from the sudden, unfamiliar sensation of being welcomed without obligation. "Thank you," she said, and meant it. The apartment was small, but not confining. The walls were warm ivory, not the sterile, chipped white she remembered from hospital break rooms and waiting areas. 2 windows faced east. One looked out toward the courtyard, where a pair of older women laughed over bird feeders. The other overlooked a quiet walking path and a budding maple tree. Helen stepped inside, carrying the single suitcase she'd kept by her side for weeks, the one that had followed her from Brian's guest room to the motel. But here, as she set it down gently by the entry table, it no longer felt like a suitcase. It felt like an arrival. Janelle gave her a few quick instructions, laundry hours, visitor policy, the buzzer code, and then offered to help unpack. Helen politely declined. "I think I need to do this part on my own." "Then I'll leave you to it," Janelle said, "but if you need anything, I'm one call away." As the door closed behind her, Helen stood alone in the center of the room. Stillness, not loneliness, just stillness. She walked over to the window, the one that overlooked the maple tree, and cracked it open. A breeze floated in, touched with grass and pollen, and the faint scent of someone's cinnamon candle down the hall. She took one deep breath, then another. A knock interrupted the quiet. She turned and smiled. Anna stood in the doorway holding a potted plant that looked as if it had been stolen from a greenhouse. "It's a peace lily," she said, "but let's not get carried away with metaphors." Helen stepped aside to let her in. "It's beautiful. You'll never kill it. Unless you try. Or forget it for 6 months." Anna handed it off like a sacred object, then scanned the room. "Not bad, Carter." "I know." Anna walked to the kitchen and peeked inside the fridge. "It's empty. I've had worse problems." They spent the next hour unpacking a few things, folding linens into drawers, tucking books into shelves. Anna placed the photo of Walter on the nightstand without comment, then stepped back as if she were straightening a gallery exhibit. "You're really doing it," she said quietly. "No more borrowed space." Helen looked around the room, at the clean surfaces, the sun-flooded floor, the way the peace lily's leaves reached toward the light without hesitation. "It's quiet," she said. "Do you like that?" "I need it." Another knock came, this one softer, tentative. Helen opened the door to find a woman her age with salt and pepper curls and an oversized cardigan. She held a tin of cookies and smiled with the kind of warmth that didn't demand anything in return. "I'm Ruth," she said, "from 2A. We like to keep an open-door policy, but no pressure. Just welcome." Helen took the tin gently. "Thank you." Anna stepped up beside her. "She bakes?" "Only when I'm avoiding laundry." Ruth grinned, then winked. "You'll learn all our coping mechanisms eventually." After she left, Helen turned to Anna, still holding the tin. "I'm not used to this." "Cookies?" "Kindness." Anna's smile softened. "Then consider this a crash course." That night, as dusk painted long shadows on the walls, Helen sat in her new armchair, blanket over her legs, tea in her hand, peace lily by the window, and watched the sky fade from coral to slate. She wasn't hiding anymore. She wasn't reacting. She was choosing. But as she sipped her tea, the hallway outside echoed with something heavy. Footsteps, 2 pairs. They stopped at her door. A knock came. Not tentative, not neighborly, deliberate. Helen didn't open the door that night. The knock had come with weight, but not urgency. Whoever stood on the other side hadn't knocked again. She sat still, teacup warm in her hands, and waited until the footsteps retreated down the hallway, unhurried, unresolved. Then she'd gotten up, locked the door with both latches, and turned her phone off. She didn't need to know who it had been. In the morning, when she turned her phone back on, the messages were waiting. 3 from Brian, 1 from a number she didn't recognize, all of them variations of the same weak demand. "We should talk." She didn't even bother to listen. Helen scrolled through the notifications, her thumb steady. She read none of them. She deleted every one. They weren't reaching her. And that silence, it didn't feel like revenge. It felt like control. Anna showed up 2 mornings later with croissants and a folder full of brochures for cruises, yoga retreats, and something called Wild Women Write, Weekend in Vermont. Helen raised an eyebrow. "This feels more like therapy than breakfast." Anna shrugged. "Call it distraction with carbs." They sat at Helen's small kitchen table, sun pouring through the window, as they shared the pastries and half laughed through the ridiculousness of senior paddleboarding and silent meditation in Utah. "I joined something," Helen said between bites. Anna looked up. "Tell me it's not a cult." "A book club," Helen replied. Anna grinned. "Same thing." The Brighthaven Book Club met every Thursday in the sunroom with mismatched mugs and a stack of dog-eared paperbacks. Helen didn't say much at first. She listened, observed. But then came the week they discussed a mystery novel, and Helen surprised herself, offering a theory about the killer's motive that made half the table gasp and one woman scribble furiously in her notes. "You should write your own," someone said. Helen smiled and shook her head. "I've already lived enough stories." But the words stuck with her for days. On Saturday, Janelle invited Helen to coffee in her office, though it barely felt like an office. A tiny lamp, a warm diffuser, a shelf full of puzzles and board games. A photo of Janelle's mom rested on the windowsill. "Everything settling okay?" she asked, pouring 2 cups. More than okay, Helen said. It feels earned. They sipped in silence for a moment before Janelle leaned forward, eyes sincere. People don't always land on their feet after what you've been through. I've seen a lot of folks show up here lost. You walked in knowing exactly where to plant roots. Helen took a long breath. I didn't always, but I know now. Janelle smiled. Then you're ahead of the curve. Later that evening, Mark called. Helen was folding laundry with the windows open and a Motown playlist humming through the Bluetooth speaker Anna insisted she own. I just wanted to check in, he said. Any sign of trouble? Only from a fictional detective, Helen replied, holding up her book. Brian tried calling again, but I don't answer. I'm not feeding the drama. You're doing the right thing, Mark said. The new will is airtight. Let him rage. The law won't bend for him. Helen walked to the window, looking out at the maple tree as a breeze tugged at its leaves. I keep waiting for the guilt to sneak back in, she said. But it hasn't. That's because you left guilt in the same place you left those outdated drafts, behind. She smiled. You're better at therapy than Anna. Don't tell her that. She'd try to invoice me. By the following week, Helen had rearranged her apartment twice, added a lamp near the reading chair, and memorized the names of the women in her building who played canasta every Tuesday. She'd made a life, one not built on borrowed rooms or tolerated presence, but on walls that held her laughter, a window that welcomed morning light, and a quiet that didn't echo with loneliness. But on a rainy Thursday, just as Helen was leaving the book club with her tote bag and a borrowed novel, she passed the front desk and heard something that made her stop mid-step. Left a message again, Carol, the receptionist, was saying to Janelle, this time asking if she'd received the certified copy of the old will. Helen's spine straightened. Janelle looked over Carol's shoulder and caught Helen's eye. Something unspoken passed between them, and for the first time in weeks, Helen felt it again. That flicker, that warning, not fear exactly, but the shadow of something about to return. Helen sat at her small writing desk, the peace lily catching late afternoon sun beside her, its leaves shifting slightly in the breeze from the open window. A blank sheet of cream-colored stationery lay in front of her. Her pen hovered above it just inches from commitment. Not fear, not doubt, just gravity. She finally began, to whom it may concern, my name is Helen Carter, and this letter is to be attached to the final, legally executed version of my will and estate plan. I'm writing it not because the law requires it, but because I want the truth on paper, not just on the books. Her handwriting was even, the loops of her cursive confident. My son, Brian Carter, is not included as a beneficiary in this estate, not out of malice, but clarity. After the passing of my husband Walter, I sought support, family, and compassion. I found myself in a house that treated me like a tenant, not a mother. Words were said. Some of them I will never forget. Some of them were never spoken, but still left bruises just the same. Helen paused, lips tightening, then continued, I do not believe in passing down harm, but I also do not believe in rewarding it. My legacy is not for those who discard people when they become inconvenient. It is for those who carry others when they stumble, who make space, who offer chairs and warmth and small kindnesses that add up to everything. She set the pen down, just for a moment to breathe, then flipped to a fresh sheet. This one was gentler, to Anna. You have always reminded me that friendship, when done right, becomes a kind of chosen family. Thank you for the rescue missions, the hard truths, the cookies, the dry humor, and the loyalty that never asked me to shrink. Whatever you do with the house, I know you'll fill it with better stories. And to Bright Haven, you didn't just give me a room. You gave me roots. You gave me Ruth's cookies, Janelle's steadiness, and a window that lets the morning light spill in without asking for rent. Use this gift for those who walk in as lost as I was, and help them feel found. Helen folded the 2 letters carefully, slid them into a labeled envelope, and sealed it. 2 days later, she sat across from Mark once more. Same desk, same efficient neatness, same comforting scent of wood polish and black coffee. This is it, she said, sliding the envelope across. Mark read the labels without opening it. You want this notarized and attached to the file? Yes. He looked at her over the tops of his glasses. I've seen a lot of people use these letters to lash out, or justify. Yours doesn't do either. I'm not angry, Helen said, just resolute. Mark reached into his drawer for the notary seal. You've left behind something stronger than money. Helen smiled. That was the goal. He stamped the envelope and filed it into a thick folder labeled Carter, Helen, Final. Then he extended his hand. She took it with quiet gratitude. You've given yourself peace, he said. No, Helen corrected gently. I earned it. That evening, Anna met her outside her apartment with a bottle of wine and 2 paper cups. To closure, she said, raising her drink. To beginnings, Helen replied. They sat on the small bench just outside her door, sipping and talking about nothing important. The sun dipped low, casting warm shadows across the corridor. I never thought I'd feel proud of myself, Helen said. But I do. Anna nudged her knee. You should. They both looked up when Janelle appeared at the end of the hall. She was carrying something, a small rectangular plaque wrapped in soft cloth. I thought it was time for something official, she said, gently kneeling by the doorframe. She unwrapped it, brushed it off, then held it out. Brass, engraved, shining in the hallway light. The Helen Carter Suite, established 2025, for a life reclaimed with grace. Helen froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Anna whispered, You've been immortalized. Janelle smiled. We don't usually name apartments, but this one had a story that changed all of us. Helen ran her fingers across the cool brass, her reflection slightly warped in the metal. She had lived through dismissal, erasure, silence, and now this, recognition, legacy. But just as the moment settled in her chest, Anna's phone buzzed. One glance at the screen, and her face shifted. What? Helen asked. Anna didn't speak at first, just turned the phone so Helen could see it. A social media post. Brian Carter, public post. Sometimes you find out your own mother rewrites history with a lawyer, but the truth always has witnesses, and mine are ready to speak. Helen blinked, then straightened, the light from her nameplate reflected in her eyes. By morning, the nameplate was up, fixed just beside the door to apartment 2C, burnished brass catching the first rays of sunlight that spilled through the hallway windows. It looked like it had always belonged there, as if the space itself had been waiting for her name all along. The Helen Carter Suite, established 2025, for a life reclaimed with grace. Helen stood in front of it, her palm resting lightly on the cool metal. A quiet pulse of pride hummed in her chest, not loud, not boastful, just whole. I should have worn lipstick, she murmured. Anna snorted behind her. You look like a damn monarch already. She lifted her phone and snapped a photo, then another, one wide, one close. We're printing this. Frame it. Maybe put it over the toilet so you can feel like royalty every morning. Helen laughed, the sound soft and genuine. I don't think royalty has to do their own laundry. Anna raised an eyebrow. I'd argue that's what makes you better than royalty. From down the hallway, Ruth appeared carrying a small tray of lemon bars and 2 more residents in tow, a gentleman with a walker and a woman in flamingo print scrubs. We heard there was a dedication, Ruth said cheerfully. We brought backup. Janelle followed just behind them, a clipboard in one hand, a ribbon in the other. Technically, she said, I was going to do this privately. But word travels fast around here. Helen turned, caught slightly off guard. You didn't have to. We wanted to, Janelle said simply. It's not just a name, it's a reminder that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it just holds its ground. She handed Helen the ribbon. Cut it? Helen blinked. You're joking. Anna leaned in. Don't you dare. With a sigh half-laced in amusement, Helen lifted the ribbon, and with a small pair of scissors Janelle had produced from her jacket pocket, cut through it. Light applause followed. Not raucous, just warm. Human, like clinking glasses at a family table. Welcome officially, Janelle said, to the home you built for yourself. Helen nodded once, swallowing the lump in her throat. Thank you, she said softly. All of you. Ruth handed her a lemon bar wrapped in a napkin shaped like a flower. For bravery, or breakfast, whichever comes first. Anna snapped one more photo, grinning. That one's going in the Brighthaven newsletter, whether you like it or not. Helen turned back to the nameplate. Let them read about something that lasts. The small group drifted away after a while, Ruth promising to host a game night, Janelle asking if she needed anything before lunch. The hallway slowly quieted again, but the echo of kindness lingered in the air. Inside the apartment, Helen placed the lemon bar on a saucer, brewed a fresh cup of tea, and settled into her chair by the window. The peace lily reached toward the sunlight as if claiming it. There were no texts from Brian that morning, no missed calls, only stillness. She picked up her book but didn't open it yet. Her eyes lingered on the door, the one now labeled with her name. It struck her, not as ego but as clarity. Brian would never see that plaque, not really. Even if he returned to glare at it, even if he tried to rip it down or mock it online, he wouldn't see it. Because to see it would mean understanding what it meant, what it cost, and that was a language he had never bothered to learn. Her life was no longer framed by what he would or wouldn't do. It was framed by the brass at her door, the warmth in her kitchen, the sound of someone laughing down the hall, and the taste of a lemon bar someone made just because. She opened her book. She began to read, and somewhere on the far edge of town, in a rented office lined with outdated law books and a freshly printed letterhead, Brian Carter sat across from a gray-suited attorney, clutching the old will like a life raft. "I want to contest it," he said, eyes bloodshot. The attorney raised an eyebrow. "On what grounds?" Brian's hand twitched. She tricked me." The lawyer tapped a file on the desk. She filed a notarized revision, with court witnesses, multiple beneficiaries, supporting letters, full mental competency certification. A pause. "You don't have a case, Mr. Carter. You have regret." Brian stood sharply. "You're wrong!" But the words didn't land. They fell flat against mahogany walls and indifferent silence. Because legacy isn't won through shouting, it's earned through grace. Back at Brighthaven, Helen smiled softly at the page in her lap and turned it. The certified copy of the will was cool to the touch, heavy not in weight, but in consequence. Helen held it with both hands, not reverently, but with something close to respect. This wasn't vengeance printed on paper. It was proof of her own handwriting, her own choice, her own clean break. She slid it into the top drawer of the walnut desk by the window. The drawer gave a soft click as it shut. Final. Not secretive. Just done. The rest of the apartment was still. Sunlight stretched across the floorboards in golden lines, filtered through the blinds like quiet music. The kettle on the stove clicked off. Moments later, she and Anna sat out on the small balcony, each with a cup of Earl Grey. The air carried that late summer edge, still warm, but with a promise of cooler days coming soon. Below them, the city glimmered in softened tones. Brake lights, window glow, the hush of early evening conversations rising from benches and bus stops. "Feels like a rooftop in Paris," Anna said, sipping. "Minus the wine and questionable plumbing." Helen chuckled. "Give me a few months and I'll hang some ivy. Maybe buy a striped scarf." "Please do," Anna said. "I've always wanted to be friends with someone pretentious." They sat in silence for a few minutes, the kind that didn't itch or pull, just filled the space like breath. The brass nameplate on the door caught the last of the sun, casting a small warm reflection on the hallway floor. From their angle on the balcony, Helen couldn't see it, but she felt it, like a steady hand at her back. "So," Anna said softly, "how's it feel? Not just the tea, all of it." Helen didn't answer right away. She looked around, at the tidy flower boxes lining the railing, the neighbors calling each other good night across balconies, the sound of a dog barking down below, then immediately being shushed by someone who probably knew its name by heart. Then she looked out, at the city that had grown quieter lately, or maybe just kinder. "It feels earned," she said. Anna nodded, like she'd been waiting for her to say it. "I keep thinking about that trunk," Helen added. How proud Brian must be, clutching those dusty old drafts. Paperwork with no weight, like waving a ticket after the train's already gone. Anna smirked. He can laminate them, frame them, cry over them with a glass of wine. They still won't get him the keys. Helen laughed again, lower this time, closer to her chest. I didn't think it would feel this good, she admitted. I thought I'd feel selfish, maybe even cruel. You're neither, Anna said. You're a woman who stopped making herself small for people who only noticed when she disappeared. Helen looked over, eyes shining. Thank you for saying that. Don't thank me. Just put it on a t-shirt and sell it at the gift shop next to your plaque. The sky darkened into indigo. The stars blinked out slowly, stubbornly, through the haze of city light. Somewhere across town, a child was probably being read to sleep. Somewhere else, Brian was likely scouring the internet for legal loopholes that didn't exist. But here, on this balcony with tea cooling in chipped mugs, Helen felt a quiet detachment from it all. Not the kind that runs from pain, the kind that has already faced it and walked through to the other side. Inside, a breeze stirred the curtains. Her book sat waiting on the end table, half read. The photo of Walter remained in its place, framed neatly beside the peace lily, which leaned even further toward the window now, growing, always, toward the light. I don't know what comes next, Helen said. Anna stood, stretched, and picked up her cup. That's the best part. Helen watched her go, the sound of her footsteps retreating gently down the hall. She sat for a moment longer, letting her hands rest in her lap, letting the air carry the evening toward quiet. Then she stood, smoothed the front of her cardigan, and stepped back inside. At her desk, she opened the drawer once more, checked the will. Still there, still hers. Then she closed it and left the room, lights dimmed, peace intact. As the city lights flickered beyond her window, Helen moved through her apartment slowly, calmly, not checking locks, not looking over her shoulder. Some things she'd carried with her, but not all. Some baggage you pack, and some you leave behind for those who deserve it.